And yes, we are live. I'm back with my friend Tom. How you doing?
Great. How are you?
I'm good.
Happy
Happy New Year.
happy 11th day of Christmas.
Yeah. Happy
11 pipers piping.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Good to see you. We saw each other
In this
on
11th hour.
Yeah, we saw each other New Year's Eve. That was fun. One of us was very drunk. I won't say which one, but
I don't recall.
that's yeah. So, how's it going? What's on your mind? And what do you want to talk about today? It's been a while since you and I did a stream or we did a couple pre-recorded things.
Yeah. I don't know. What do you want to talk about? Do you want to continue? Yeah.
Catholicism.
You
Christ and
want
his
to?
church. Christ and his church. That's how I like to phrase it.
Okay. So do you want to continue where we left off at the party, New Year's Eve?
Sure.
Okay.
Have a couple drinks there.
It's not beer o'clock yet. I've got my coffee. I want to be sharp,
It was late. It was very late. I think we arrived at quarter to midnight and we left at 3 in the morning. You may have left at around 2:30, but
About two, yeah.
So yeah, give a summary of what we were discussing. This is a good memory test for you. I can't believe you can remember anything, but go ahead and give your summary of what you think we talked about.
Well, I brought up my objection to the doctrine of infallibility of the Pope,
Right.
because we were talking about the errors in the church in various ways in these modern times, and trying to get to the roots of it. And you were defending I think I don't think you outright, uh, in so many words, defended the infallibility of the Pope, but I answered that to you because it seemed you were defending the power of the tradition or the authority of the higher clerical authority of the church. So that was my challenge.
Yeah, just to be clear, I did say to you that there are three attributes that the church has that we cannot doubt: authority, infallibility, and indefectibility. Those are the three attributes, the three primary attributes of the church. And then you have the four marks by which we can recognize that church and find that church. The church is one, holy, Catholic, and apostolic. So with those seven, we're well armed to defend our faith.
Okay. Now, so the four
Marks.
and
three attributes: authority,
yeah,
infallibility, and indefectibility. So the church will always be here, and she gets her authority from God. It's a God-given authority, and that
right.
there's an infallibility, which is a charism of infallibility, which has four parts to it. There's the sensus fidelium, which I mentioned to you on New Year's Eve. The sense of the faithful, when the body of the faithful believe unanimously, they cannot err. When the bishops all get together under the Pope and with the Pope and never separate from the Pope in an ecumenical council, that's another exercise of the infallibility. There's the ex cathedra teaching of the Pope on his own. That's a third form of infallibility. There's a fourth form of infallibility, which I'll have to look up because I can't remember it. But those are the big three anyway.
Okay, so how does the Catholic Church rectify agitation or rebellion within the ranks, or schism, as you might call it? What is it equipped? In what way is it equipped through these marks that you mentioned to deal with these things? Like, is the Pope accountable?
Yeah, a future Pope could bring judgment on a prior Pope, but only a new Pope can judge a prior Pope. No one can judge the Pope except a Pope that follows him. Okay, that's the way it is. So it may be, and I admitted to you this at the party, it may be the case, that Pope Francis Bergoglio is the Antichrist. That's the extreme case, or anti-Pope, or just a heretic, or whatever, bad Pope, whatever. And we could already make judgments about objective matter if he's a bad Pope, like if he's raping young boys in the Sistine Chapel or whatever. We can say objectively, we can judge that objective matter. We can't judge his heart, but we could have a pretty good idea what's going on in his heart if he's doing that. So there are things we can judge, But when it comes to fraternal correction, I mean, there are very few of us that are in a position to actually talk to the Pope directly, take him aside quietly and correct him. So it's really none of our business. But a
Mm,
future Pope could say, I condemn this or that that the Pope thought, said, or did. And
mm,
a future Pope could even say that he wasn't Pope at all. But until that time, and there's no point assuming the
right.
worst, there's no point assuming the worst. And the whole church declares that Francis is Pope at every single Mass. It's always giving,
Mhm,
prayers for the
mhm,
Pope, who, and they name by name, Francis. So,
mhm, mhm. Well, one of the problems I have with recent debates about the alleged schism in the current Catholic Church is this dividing of people into the traditionalist camp
mm.
versus what do they call the other camp?
Well,
Uh,
there's the left, there's the right, which are both erring and rebelling in different ways, and then they're just regular Catholics who are,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
uh, not stupid and naive, but they don't make a rebellion. Like I'm not rebelling against the living magisterium. I've got my questions, I got
Mm,
my doubts, I got my little disagreements, I've got my
okay.
disagreements. Okay,
But
but
you don't think there's a lumping in with like some of the more radical schismatics uh, and are obviously causing problems
yeah,
and not in a productive way. But then there's others that are more sane and reasoned and measured about their questions about the direction in which the papacy is taking the teachings of the church. And to lump them in with the radicals or the traditionalists, which is a a euphemism for radical, it seems, in the context in which they're using that word. This, to me, sort of strikes a parallel with the terrible state that political discourse is.
right. Everyone's a racist. Everyone's a
Yeah,
misogynist.
you're either
Everyone's
this or
everyone's
that,
a
and it's a
everyone's
big
a Nazi. Everyone's this and that.
lumping in, and yeah, all this stuff. So, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I love everything about radical traditionalism except the
Mm.
satanic rebellion against the authority of Christ and his church. So like I mean
Yeah, I
if
agree.
someone is going on and on and on about the beauty of the liturgy, the beauty of tradition, the beauty of the saints and the beauty of the the good old days, I'm
Yeah,
100% with you. And the beauty of Catholic morality and sexual morality, I'm 100% with you. It's only when you start saying Bergoglio is the Antichrist, that's when I have a problem.
yeah,
That's the line that I won't cross. So
right.
it just so happens that a lot of good, nice traditionalist Catholics, they
Yeah,
cross that line. They cross that
yeah, they
line.
do.
Like I mean, they do. I mean,
Yeah,
I've talked to a lot of them on Twitter and elsewhere and on my podcast. And if you just
yeah,
scratch them just enough, they're going to
yeah.
betray the satanic rebellion against the authority of Christ and His Church. I mean, that's the line that I just won't cross. I still
Okay.
love them. I still like them. I still respect them. I still
Hmm.
admire
Hmm.
everything they're
Hmm.
doing,
Hmm.
over against the sexual license of the left or whatever else going on the left, communism, whatever you want
Yeah,
to call it, on the
yeah,
left. I don't like that crap. Like
yeah.
I like the right. But my problem with the right is there's a subtle undermining of authority. And to me, that's way more important than some guy that just wants to get his noodle wet.
Yeah. I agree. Uh, and I've also, gone through many phases in my thinking about Pope Francis, and I've softened a little bit
Mhm.
uh, because I've done my due diligence to look into what he actually said in the context in which he said certain things. But there are still issues, two namely, that really stand out where I'm kind of surprised and disturbed. Pope Francis's statements about COVID and his position on the idea of one world government or a government, a world government authority.
Yeah,
Those
those both
two
seem extremely naive to me. That just seems very naive, both of those. But I try to.
on the part of Francis, you mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it could be naivety. It could be, but is that an excuse for someone of his stature? The Pope of the Church is not supposed to be naive. Like they should have a pretty firm grasp of both the teachings of the church, the spirit of Christ, and the history the world and how power works, the
Yeah.
fact that the prince of darkness is the spirit of this world,
Yeah.
all these things. I mean, a Catholic, of the laity is not expected to be naive given their teaching, let alone the Pope. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's a legitimate excuse.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you've seen professional athletes when they try to play a sport that's not their own. It's just embarrassing how bad they are at it. It's just like people do have blind spots, people do have weaknesses, and it's like
Hmm.
the Pope. I mean, we could have really high expectations on him. He's a genius in every area, but he's not, and
Yeah,
he can have blind spots. And if you read the history of the popes and of the saints, to be honest,
yeah,
they weren't right
yeah.
about everything. They weren't right about everything. They were not right about everything.
Okay, so my question then would be, is a Catholic in sin if in their hearts they uh, disagree or do not follow certain pronouncements of the current Pope?
Sorry, I was giving a shout out to my friend Daniel Jazinovich and Redens in the live chat. Just got distracted a bit. Say that again, Tom.
I say, is the Catholic in sin if in their hearts they do not agree or follow a
I
certain
hope not,
teaching?
because
It's a
then I'm in irremediable sin. I can't
Yeah,
escape my sin. I can't escape my sin
right.
if that's the case. So that can't
Okay,
be the case. It can't be the
so that
case.
brings me back to the question of the infallibility of the Pope. If the Pope is infallible, then
Has he
it
declared
follows that
infallibly? Has he
that
declared
it's a crime to
infallibly?
church, it's a sin to disagree with him because he's infallible.
No, but has he infallibly declared on the COVID jab that it's the moral obligation? Because he's on the record as saying it has to be voluntary. It has to be informed consent. So there's no
Mhm.
informed consent at hand. So I mean, if it has to be voluntary, he's just
Uh,
strongly recommending it. He's like, hey, let's be good to our
well,
neighbor by protecting each
he's
other.
not my mother or my
Yeah.
brother strongly recommending an absurdity on me, which I, of course, I forgive them, and I'm not going to listen to them. He's the Pope of apparently infallible authority,
Yeah.
and he's strongly recommending getting the jab as
Yeah.
an act of love.
Yeah.
Coming from the Pope, you don't think that this is going to have a severe impact on people's decisions?
Yeah, I've met Catholics and
Yeah.
I've had heated arguments outside of a parish here in Montreal with the guy that used to
Mhm.
be my friend, and he thinks I'm
Mhm.
insane because I didn't get the jab. And he said, "Look, the Pope
Mhm.
said to get it." So, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
big deal. It's a big deal, And I
Yeah.
got violently attacked at a church for going
You
inside, even though I
yeah.
had the endorsement of my bishop to do it. So, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
big deal. It's a big deal. I'm
Mhm.
disappointed. I wish Pope Francis
Yeah.
were had his eyes open for what I think is obvious, but he doesn't apparently.
Right.
Apparently he doesn't. So, and he
So,
hasn't infallibly declared on it. It's just his opinion. It's just his personal
yeah,
opinion.
but see, the thing is that you can't, in that position of authority, just sort of be promiscuous with your opinions, knowing that you are seen as an infallible authority. When you speak, it should be for a reason,
But
and
what I
that's the
do,
other thing too.
yeah,
Is he's more of a media personality than any pope that I remember. I mean, since the dawn of electronic media, of course, they became, in comparison to pre-media days, more media savvy. But Francis, in particular, seems to have a lot more media attention, press conferences, and whatnot than previous popes. So the fact that he's kind of become a media personality and that he's tossing out these opinions as an infallible authority of the church, this raises alarm bells for me.
yeah. Well,
What I'm saying?
yeah. The way
Yeah,
that I think about it, the way that I am able to sleep at night, okay, is
yeah,
by understanding that there are principles. I always try to interpret everything with a hermeneutic of continuity. So
yeah.
when Pope Francis preaches for the environment or climate change or one world
Mm,
government or COVID, get your jab and all that sort of thing, I find the common ground where I can agree with him, where there's a Catholic continuity of
mm,
Catholic principles, and there always, always,
mhm,
always is common ground where I can say, well, look, the principle, I know that this principle is at work in his heart, and I love that principle. It's
mhm,
a Catholic principle, and that's where I'm going with my hermeneutic of continuity. I'm not going to go to
mhm,
the outer layers where it's actually dealing with manifest reality of Satan running this world and the COVID pandemic and all that sort of thing. I'm not going to examine that part because that part makes Pope Francis seem like a bad guy. So I'm not gonna go do an analysis on that level. I'm going to do the
Hmm.
analysis deeper in the layer of principles. Okay, love your neighbor. Let's protect ourselves at all times, protect our vulnerable at all times. And I can just get behind those principles. And on Judgment Day, Pope Francis will find out that he was wrong about the one world
Yeah.
government and the WHO. And he's going to find out that they were wrong. You know, they were evil.
Okay, well, it seems we're mostly on the same page as to how to deal with it, and I want to be clear that disagreement with the Pope, no matter how wrong on any issue he might be, should never descend into a kind of rebellion against the Catholic Church itself, or actions that tar and smear the institution itself. And the point is not to drive him out, but the point is to stand strong as a Catholic and weigh everything in your heart according to the wisdom of the Lord, and test all spirits to see whether they come from the devil or God. Um, and there is an authority that is above the world church and above the Pope, and that is Jesus.
Yeah.
And I will also I'll say a few things about the so-called Great Awakening. People are waking up, and now there's two factions of wake: the woke, and those who are waking up to the corruption of this world,
The red
etc.
pill
The
phenomenon.
red pilled and the blue pilled, etc. The danger of this kind of extreme situation, whenever it's manifested in the world, and today is a particularly strong one, brings into play many opportunities for power uh, to steer the opposition uh, towards false solutions, or agendas that actually serve
Yeah.
the devil even more. So, um, but I will say that I think there are what COVID especially brought to the fore for me and you and a lot of people, um, is just the sheer contrast between people who sort of by habit all their life went along to go along, trusted authority, and then the big moment, uh, the big test of our spirit, if you will, reveals just how different the two. I mean, before a crisis comes, you're interacting with people, you agree, you don't agree, but it's not a big deal. You still think essentially we're all good, we're all fallible. I might be wrong, they might be wrong, or I'm convinced I'm wrong, but they're so great in other ways, and it shouldn't come between friends, and blah blah blah. And then a crisis comes, and you see who, like, uh, when Jesus was betrayed by his own disciples at the moment of truth, when the great um, revelation was about to be perfected and completed, and they all run away like chickens. And it's sort of like a similar thing that I saw with this division that we noticed after COVID. But within that, so there's people that say no way, this is obviously a fraud. They got that much right. It's very easy to point out what's wrong. Much harder to see how and why it came to that point, and way to which direction to point yourself uh, out of it. And that's the harder task. Okay. Um, but I will say that there are a lot of people that are Christians and don't realize it. Okay. And that is those people that are less prone to falling for deception. When their nose is still working, their conscience is not so blotted out that they can smell a fish, and they have the strength and courage and resolve to stand against it. That doesn't mean rioting. It just means in your own chair, in your own living room, showing sort of, no,
or
in your
standing on
heart.
the
Like, that's a
overpass.
big
That's
no.
what I think
And you
about.
just don't comply.
Those
What's
those
that?
those non-Christians who were lining the overpasses during the Freedom Convoy as the trucks came east.
Yeah.
A lot of
Yeah.
them were not, explicitly Christian, but I see what you're saying in terms of like there's that spirit that was there.
Yes.
And we didn't
Yes.
discriminate. I didn't discriminate when I went to Ottawa. I didn't discriminate like, hey, show me that you're a card carrying Catholic or Christian.
No,
I
no,
didn't
no.
do that. It's like there's a
That's
spirit
right.
here. There's a spirit here that's at work. And I mean,
Mhm.
a lot of these people were probably pro-choice on abortion and everything else. But I
Yeah.
didn't. I didn't go around policing that because I was just loving the
No.
spirit that was
Yeah.
active at that time. I think that's what you're getting at, right?
Yes. And it's the same thing when Christianity was born. When Christ came onto this earth and began his ministry, uh, the people that came to him and fell at his feet were the ones that were hungry for the truth, and they recognized it when it finally came. They already had the heart, the spirit of God's children in them before Christianity was even born. Okay, so the truth and the spirit of Christ, the spirit of truth, and the Holy Spirit has been operating since the beginning of time in the course of human history. Uh, so um, I think that, as I said in many other podcasts with you, one of my greatest conversion stories is that of G.K. Chesterson's wife, who was led to God by the devil. Um, in other words, the error becomes so obvious that you recoil and um, and you're more able to see that light, which is in such contrast to that error, and that light is God, or the path to God. And so her heels were turned in the direction towards God. And so similarly, the errors and the absurdities that are being foisted on us at an exponential rate is waking people up insofar as that they're fully cognizant of something being deeply, deeply wrong, and so they're more open and susceptible and brave, if you will, to pursue the truth. And if you're in the spirit of loving the truth, you are in the spirit of loving Christ, or you're ready now to receive Him. And that's what I've been noticing too, is that people like since COVID, I've never been the Bible thumping kind of proselytizing, evangelizing kind of Christian. I never really brought it up, but in the course of these years after COVID, I found it much more easy, and I found myself being people being more receptive and willing to listen to what I have to say on matters of theology and Christianity. People have become more open and understanding and hearing it, because now that something sparked them, shook them up towards the truth, and Christ is the truth, the way, and the life. So um, and we're at such a critical time now, as you know, with the Israel-Palestine thing, and that's bringing many things to the fore, because the power of the Israeli lobby and the ADL as censorious and manipulative organizations, I don't think is a controversial matter. It's a fact hidden in plain sight, and it has to be called out. E. Michael Jones does a great job at that. Doesn't mean we don't love Jews. It means if we love our neighbor, then we care about their error. we point out their error, it doesn't mean we want to kill them.
Yeah, the first error we should point out to them is that their beloved Messiah came 1,000 years ago, so
Okay.
or 2,000
Well,
years ago, whatever it was.
yeah.
That's the first
Um,
error that they made, is rejecting
mhm.
their own Messiah. But God, I don't know if God ordained that or permitted it. I guess he permitted it, but I mean that's
He
that.
permits everything.
Yeah, but my
I mean,
friend,
that people misunderstand what that means. He permitted evil to come into this world.
yeah,
He doesn't permit us to be evil. But what he does permit the world to be is that testing ground that we cannot form our spiritual character or come into truth without a struggle. A struggle. Um, if it was just handed to us in a silver spoon, we wouldn't amount to much. And that's the whole point of the prodigal son, the jealous brother. Prodigal son did everything wrong, and he comes back expecting punishment. He didn't even beg for mercy. He just told his father, "I really screwed up, and you have any mercy in your heart, just give me a lowly job again, and I'll try to pay you back," and blah blah blah. And instead of beating him, the father rejoices and crowns him and kills the fatted calf and the whole bit. And the brother is jealous because he's been obedient and nothing but good to his father. And this guy really screwed up, and I should deserve the kind of honors that I've never gotten that kind of honor. And look, and he's the bad guy. And so for a moment, the brother fell into sort of like the spirit of Cain. And but the whole point of that story to me is that the person who really screwed up and fell into error, full hog, and then comes out of it, is the one that the, all the angels of heaven rejoice the most, because by their will they turn their heels back to God. But also, they understand the nature of error better, having experienced it and having lived it in themselves, and then having turned away from it. Whereas the person that just follows the rules and aye aye captain, the obedience part is good, but the depth of their understanding and the strength of their character, if tested, is in question. So hence the jealousy. The jealousy is a sort of an outward sort of a deflected energy sent to an outside object to avoid to avoid taking account of your own weakness or failures, shortcomings, etc. So the Christian way is the opposite of that. It's like, look at yourself first before you lash out at the enemy or the perceived enemy. Like, take a good long look at yourself, and we could we can measure these principles against what's happening in Israel and Palestine right now, and how the discourse is unfolding around this problem. There's those who, and it's pretty mainstream, trying to turn it into a religious thing.
yeah,
Muslims versus the
Jews.
Jews, and it's I find that quite cheap for a number of reasons. It's quite obvious that this is a 75 plus year uh, occupation, some will call it. In any case, it's a 75-year long um,
Situation.
tension,
Yeah,
um, conflict, and there's psychology involved. Humans are humans, and it has to be examined according to conditions on the ground first and foremost before you bring religion into it, because any crisis or any situation where people find themselves the victims of something, they will always bring their religion into it, along with philosophies, politics, but their religion, whatever their culture is, will always come into it as a lens through which to understand what's happening and what to do about it. None of us are innocent of that. So, of course, religion is going to come into it. But first, there's a situation that arose, and there's human beings involved, and there's psychology involved, and there's the good old moral law and the cause and consequence of the universe, etc. These things have to be looked at first. And so, when you pit it against people like pit it against religion, or a people against a people, then you're forced into this false dichotomy, or us and them. One side is good, one side is bad, and that will never get resolved without a lot of bloodshed, and that never solves anything, because history unfolds from that, and on and on. So it has to stop. It's not a religious problem unless we look at the underlying philosophy of modern Judaism, where you have these atheists, representatives of the Israeli government, going on television and saying that the Bible says, you know, we were here first, and the Bible says this and that according to the Bible, and these people are atheists. And they bring up the Bible. Well, wait a minute. And not only that, but what exactly are you quoting, and what did God mean? Uh, this at least has to be questioned, especially in a secular world. But suddenly we're not allowed to question these things, and to do so is to be anti-Semite. So on the face of it, whatever grounds on which Israel stands, and on the side of right or otherwise, that's besides the point. For now, I mean, it's not besides the point, but in this, what I'm talking about, the principle I'm pointing out is that this kind of a tactic cannot be accepted, because it shuts down dialogue, and it's a means of manipulation and avoiding accountability. So, so the anti-Semitism charge is obviously a huge bludgeon, okay, pressuring the world to avoid the charge of anti-Semitism. And the game is up. I think a lot of people are waking up to that in more and more numbers. That it's just a manipulation device. And it's like, no, we don't hate Jews. Uh, yes, we think that Israelis and Palestinians should live a secure and free and safe life, of course. But there's a crisis at hand, and we have to be able to talk about it. And all sides have to be able to be willing to be held accountable, and to weigh their strengths and weaknesses and their mistakes, and owe up to them. There's not one side that's perfect and the other that's evil. There's not one side that's a victim and the other that is not. Um, well, everyone involved in this crisis is a victim, you know. Um, but the enemy is within, and that's the first Christian principle: is that the enemy is within, and everything outside of you is to be examined with that in mind. That we're all sinners. That the to know thyself is to know thine enemy. Okay, but if you avoid accountability and you live your life in a sort of victimhood complex, then everything about your lot in life is everyone else's fault. That's what it does to your mentality. It's always somebody else's fault. Okay, and so war is intractable in such conditions, and unresolvable, and a lot of blood is spilled unnecessarily.
I'd
So,
like to bounce an idea off you. I just want to give a shout out to M. She showed up in the live chat here, Emily, and FA showed up. I'm going to be interviewing him
okay.
soon. But I want to bounce an idea off you. Okay, so we can picture any disgusting situation, gang rape in prison, this war, that war. But let's take Gaza, Israel, whatever's happening there, some atrocious moment. Okay, so like think of it as a film producer or director. You're gonna like take this scene, you're gonna analyze the scene, whatever. So there's someone suffering, and there's someone inflicting suffering, and uh, they are not going to live forever in this sick fallen world. They're going to die one way or the other. I mean, the victim's going to die right away. The other guy might live another 50 years or whatever, but it doesn't really matter. They're both going to die, and there's
Hmm.
death, judgment, heaven, hell. Like that's it. There's death, judgment, heaven, hell for everyone, right?
Yeah.
The victim, the victimizer, whatever. Okay, and everyone's mixed, good,
Yeah.
bad, good intentions, bad intentions. Okay, so we see this scene and we think, okay, victim, victimizer, but it's more complicated than that because they're both good and innocent and guilty and evil, and it's all mixed up. Okay, but at the end of the day, it's death, judgment, heaven, and hell. And if God willing, you and I make it to heaven, we're going to enjoy the company of those who made it to heaven. And if God forbid we end up in hell, we're going to be miserable with them forever in hell. But on Judgment Day, we're going to find out the real story of the heart of each and every character in this drama that's playing out, salvation history. And so, on one level, we can really do a God's eye view of every scene and every war and every horrible situation that's playing out in the news and the headlines. Okay, so that's what I like to do when it comes to current events, is just to tell myself, well, look, God is good, God is just, and repentant sinners go to heaven, and unrepentant sinners go to hell. Period. Period.
Hmm.
And the
Hmm.
suffering here below is nothing compared to the sufferings of hell, and the suffering of hell, the suffering here below is nothing compared to the joys of heaven. It's all nothing here. It's nothing. Okay. And the pleasures of the guy who's raping or whatever he's doing and getting money and getting power, those pleasures are nothing compared to the
Yeah.
pains of hell and compared to the joys of heaven. So everything here
Yeah.
below is nothing. Everything here below is nothing. And so
That's right.
when it comes down to an analyzing any geopolitical situation and current events, I like to go to
Hmm.
the four last things: death, judgment, heaven, and hell. And the bottom line
Hmm.
is, are you repentant? Do you believe, and are you repentant? Jesus said, repent and believe. That's what it comes down to. Same thing with
That's right.
the blessing of same-sex couples. It's like, who cares if some faggot, rebellious, wolf in sheep's clothing priest or bishop or whatever is blessing some union, and he knows that he's blessing the union and they're smiling on sin? Who cares? Who cares? They can still repent. They can still go to heaven. And if they don't, they're going to go to hell. It's like, that's it. That's the analysis. It's the only analysis we need to bring to bear. We need to love
Mhm.
people and bring them closer to Christ so that they can repent and go to heaven. And if they're already on their way to heaven, we can help them get a higher place in heaven and help ourselves get a higher place in heaven. And if they're on their way to hell, hopefully we can be instrumental in God's grace to help them to avoid that. So for me, the whole political analysis, the Jews, the Jesuits, and everything else, it boils down to that analysis. So I just want to hear your feedback on that.
Um,
Is it naive and Pollyanna glasses to just disregard all the mechanisms that are at place? Satan's the prince of this world. He's got this in place. He's got that in place, and we have to be aware of it and deal with it. Like, because I choose to sort of ignore all of
I think what you're pointing to is that is the Christian element of the fine art of not giving a shit,
that. Yeah.
uh, and the Christian element of that is well, as it says, in the Gospel of John, do not make friends with this world, um, which is to say, always be cognizant of the fact that the real life is in the eternal realm. This world is coming and going, sure as your own body is coming and going, and to focus your priorities on the eternal and on the principles, the solid, godly, spiritual principles, which should guide your life, and do not get so bogged down and agitated and disturbed by the happenings of this world. So that is the Christian element of the fine art of not giving a shit. When it ceases to be Christian is when you take it too far to the point of psychopathy. But that is the razor's edge that we're called to navigate. Uh, the godly life is a razor's edge, or narrow is the gate. Narrow is the path and the gate. So, and that is, you know, this is how the pendulum swings. Okay, that something goes wrong and it goes boom that way, and then people are far more susceptible in their fear and their and what they've endured, the trauma and all that stuff, to see everything that's on that same thing that's swinging, everything on it that went the wrong way is I'll have nothing to do with that, and
Mm.
so it swings the other way without so, like the golden mean is thrown out the window, in other words, and of course that won't work. So then repeat and cycle, and it goes to the other side. Will have nothing to do with anything that was on that swinging pendulum. Um, and the razor's edge is to realize is that the every element in this universe was put here by the Creator. Okay, whether it be the spirit and the flesh, whether it be right wing, left wing, uh, whether it be paganism and monotheism, whether it be this or that, um, the yin and yang nature of the universe is that there are opposites that are held together by a very thin fabric and they become one. So there's a harmony where the tension point is mitigated by this very thin membrane. It's very graceful and it works together. And Satan's number one tool is to sever that fine membrane so that the disparate parts that make the whole are separated, thereby corrupting and depleting each part of its original meaning. Okay, so that I think is what we're seeing playing out throughout world history and becomes all the more clear uh, when we're in a point of severe crisis.
Well, a good example of that, like on the positive side, is when Paul split the Sanhedrin or whatever it was by talking about the resurrection, or talking about whatever he talked about. That he knew it would divide the Pharisees and the Sadducees, right? Do you remember that?
Right, right, yeah,
So
yes,
it's like it's a good trick. It's a good trick,
yeah.
like, but the bad guys use that trick a lot more than the good guys use that trick. You
Well,
know what I mean?
but yes, the good guys are supposed to bring the parts together
Yeah.
to 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 communicate together so that they realize that they need each other, that they're not so different, but they're both corrupt and they're both wrong in equal measure when that membrane that connects them is separated because they cannot work anymore because they need each other. This is how it seems nature is constructed. And I think this is the way that, so like the fine art of not giving a shit, just, in the best meaning of that term, is to be detached from the flesh and worldly events and even personal events that occur to you, to be humble and detached enough so that you can get out of yourself and your own selfish and egotistical desires and wishful thinkings and fears, and to get out of that and to have a bird's eye view and to be able to see and to see yourself in the situation as just another character and be able to, okay, what's really going on here, and you know um, and always remember that, well, we're going to be dead soon anyway, so what's more important? That's the hardest thing to do. That's why Christianity is hard. We shouldn't boast as Christians that because well, we believe, and so therefore because that's a challenge that faces every living human being. Uh, and it's been like that from the beginning. It's the war against true consciousness and the ego, the spirit and the flesh, worldly power and godly power, and on and on and on.
I don't know if you know, but E. Michael Jones accused me of Quietism, which is actually a heresy. But I don't engage in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
yeah. Because my passive, my passive non-resistance to the political nonsense and the Jewish question and all that sort of thing. So anyway, he's a nice guy. I think he likes me. He's
right, right, right,
first
right, right.
semester.
Okay, never. I don't remember him using the word quietism, but I
Yeah,
do remember that argument. And yeah, I have a couple of things to say about that. But first, you were going to say
yeah. I was going
something.
to say something. I have this fantasy of, because I used to play, well, since adolescence I've been playing video games on and off. And I'm not a huge fan of video games, just sort of like a distraction, something to do. Like we do jigsaw puzzles. Sometimes I play video games. But I had this fantasy about how to create a Christian video game where it's like, it's AAA game, lots of good graphics, lots of, characters,
Mhm.
plot, everything. But the trick is that from the very opening scene, if you move your mouse or you touch your keyboard to move your character or to do any action whatsoever, there are consequences, and the consequences always result in game over, okay, one way or another. So
Uh-huh.
the trick is, if you want to win this game, there's stuff happening in this world, this virtual world, this fake world of the video game. There's a lot of stuff happening, and our tendency is to react, right?
Hmm.
Big monster walks up to you. The tendency would be go attack him, run away, hide, whatever, like any action. But my trick with my video game is the way you win, the way you get through the whole story is you don't touch your mouse keyboard, you don't move, you don't do anything, and all this action just goes on around you, and then there's a happy ending.
Okay.
I don't think it's going to sell well, this game, but I mean it's sort of like, maybe I am a quietist. Maybe I do believe in some sort of Zen, detachment, some Eastern mysticism. Maybe I have leanings like that, and maybe
Mm,
it's partly good, maybe it's partly bad. But like I have fantasies like this where
mm,
we can escape the troubles of the world by detaching and really not engaging. So,
yeah,
might be mental illness, it might be, cowardice, it might be all kinds of negative things, but there
yeah.
might be a Christian kernel to it too that, that we could tap into.
Well, I remember E. Michael Jones saying, reminding you of the biblical imperative to shine your light and to speak, to expose the
Yeah,
ways of
I agree
darkness,
with that. Yeah, I agree with
all
that.
that stuff. So I think that's what he was referring to. As far as quietism goes, I've always had a problem with that word too. I would be accused by assorted leftists for being a quiet, to
Oh
be
yeah,
guilty of
oh yeah.
quietism, because I refuse to give a crap about this or that. Um, it's but in the case of E. Michael Jones, he's invested his whole life in confronting this Jewish question, and he's very involved. Okay, and I think his work is wonderful. I think he's doing great work. Um, I can understand his frustration, though, uh, because he seems to be a sort of lone wolf fighting in the dark. There's not a whole lot of allianceship he's gathered around him in the Catholic Church. He definitely has some. He's sort of like a cult figure,
Well, there's
and he
Nick
is.
Fuentes. Nick Fuentes is pretty vocal again, about the Jewish question or whatever.
Yeah. Well, much of what he says is correct, and I do agree with him on almost everything that he talks about in that regard. And I also agree with him that um, teachers and priests and popes have to be held to a much higher standard than you or me, so that speaking out against perceived error is something that should be freely debated and put on the table. And a humble teacher will more than happy be more than happy to accept challenges and questions. If they're innocent, they have nothing to hide. If they're in error, they're humble enough to admit it. If there's confusion, he's strong enough to take it on and do his bit to clear it up. So There's nothing wrong with holding teachers to a high standard. Um, and that goes not within the church, only within the church, but in our so-called democracies. I've always loathed that argument that such and such a leader is terrible, and you take a stand against them. They say, well, you didn't vote, so you have no right to speak. Or what are you telling me this for? I didn't vote for him, or such nonsense like this. And isn't that absurd? That's the most absurd thing to say. As if only certain people have a right or an authority or expertise to speak up on certain matters when it comes to morality, the law, and the direction that your own country is taking. We should always be brave enough to speak our mind, uh, whether we're right or wrong. Of course, we're going to speak our mind. We're gonna be thinking that we're right. Otherwise, we wouldn't be so motivated to speak up, unless we're actively embarking on some conspiracy to deceive. But nonetheless, you open your mouth. It means you have something to say and you want to say it, right or wrong, and it has to be aired freely and challenged freely. Okay. So my answer to people that charged me with quietism was always like, "What are you talking about? Do you know me at all? I rarely shut my mouth." Either I'm saying, "But don't you see this?" or I'm saying, "Well, I don't really give a shit."
Yeah.
But either way, I'm never quiet. And if my mouth start moving, my mind is always going, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." And there's always a war going on inside, and I'm never quiet about that either.
I
So,
got I got another idea to bounce off of you. I had a guest on recently. He may be insane, I don't know, but uh, you know, he was pretty adamant about the Jesuits. He's really on a mission against the Jesuits. And he
okay,
he he did more than anyone, more than E. Michael Jones, more than Nick Fuentes, more than anyone, to sort of persuade me that there's a conspiracy, a worldwide global conspiracy, and it's not the Jews. This is the thing about his theory. It's like the Jews are a cover for the Jesuits. Like he's the first one ever. I've been hearing about the Jesuits my whole life, but he's the first one ever to make me think, wow,
yeah,
maybe it is the Jesuits. Maybe it is the Jesuits, you know? And my friend in the live chat here mentioned the Jesuits a couple of times. I don't know if he was being silly or sarcastic or sincere, but it's for the first time ever I thought, wow, maybe it's the Jesuits, because the principle that he brought up, which is very powerful, is that the fall of the best is the worst. And in the Freemasons, according to him, I don't know if it's true or not, but according to him, you have to be baptized Christian so that they can pervert you. So there's more demonic power to be extracted from
right,
a bad Christian, an apostate Christian, than just some Jew or Muslim. So
right,
he really did a good job of making me think, wow, maybe the infiltration in the church. There's no doubt there's infiltration in the church. There's no doubt about that by the
yeah,
Freemasons and others. There's no doubt
yeah,
about that. But for the first time ever, I thought, wow, maybe it is a conspiracy where Satan's using the Jesuit order. He's infiltrated the Jesuit order. And he himself, my friend John Black, he admitted, St. Ignatius of Loyola is a saint. He's a good man, whatever. It's not his fault. It's just like the corruption within the order that he founded. So I don't buy into it 100%, but a lot more than I used to. Like just by that principle that, of course, Satan's going to attack the Catholic Church, and of course, Satan's going to use Catholics, or at least Christians, to do the most of his satanic work, which is, if you talk to any exorcist, it's always very legalistic with Satan and the contracts that he makes, and everything gets approval from God, and everything's triple stamped by God. And it's like Satan's not tricking God. Satan's getting approval from God for every move that he makes. And
yeah,
so it would make sense that the currency, Satan's currency, is Christian souls. It's Christian souls who rebel against God. So that really opened my eyes a lot, even though there's nothing really new in there, but he sort of connected the dots in a way that I thought, wow, maybe this smoke screen with the Jews is just a clever ruse. And the Jews are weak. They're not powerful. It's the Jesuits, it's the Christians, it's the Catholics. So
yeah.
what do you think about that?
Well, I think that you're spot on about the fact that the devil is becomes most aggressive in his deception towards those that are finally moving into the light. Uh, the truth is his number one enemy, and so
He's
when the
not
truth,
worried about the Scientologists
no,
or the
no, no,
Mormons. He's not worried about
he's
them.
worried about he's worried about the children of God waking up and seeing through his cunning plans, and that freaks him out. And so he doubles down on his deception to try to prevent them from falling onto God's path, or rising onto God's path. So that's no surprise there. It's not the Jesuits, nor is it the Jews as the prime movers of conspiracy. They are just tools, and the tools of the devil's work goes way beyond that, before that. Okay, so the Jews are a tool. Um, uh, the Christians are a tool, um, and utopians of all colors are a tool.
Mm.
Because one thing that if we could find connecting thread, a commonality between all these various factions and powers on earth and peoples. One commonality that they all have, like the corruption of the Jews, the corruption of the Catholics, the conspiracies, the Illuminati, Freemasons, and on and on and on, and your run-of-the-mill utopian leftist agitator. One thing they all have in common is that they're fixated on the world, and they're trying to establish a heaven on earth. And so they've got the cart before the horse. They're taking themselves to be God. They're giving a shit way too much and for the wrong things, and their schemes always backfire, because as soon as you make the earth, which is to say by extension your flesh, which is to say by extension your ego, when you make these things your god, then you basically take that light of God and your God-given conscience, which is supposed to be shining on your heart, always points outwards.
Mm.
And you've completely abandoned that work of self-knowledge. And everything has become externalized, and everything is either your friend on your side or your enemy to be retooled or eliminated. And that is such a great source of just about every conceivable evil on earth. And so you were talking about the Messiah, and the Jews rejected the Messiah when he came, but the way they perceive it is that he's not the Messiah, and they are still waiting for their Messiah. And the way I've heard many of them describe their Messiah sounds very much like the Antichrist, because their Messiah is a political and military leader who brings in a new empire, a new world order for the benefit of the chosen ones, and their enemies will be smited and eliminated or put in their place. They're looking for a heaven, a Jewish heaven on earth. And that is precisely the description of an antichrist that will deceive the whole world, even some of the elect. Because especially after a series of crises and world traumas, and with big ones to come, the big trauma of a world war or a massive economic collapse or something like this will produce a worldwide trauma on top of the lingering effects of the traumas of World War I and World War II. And when you have a traumatized population, they are much more prone to cling to some promise of uh, a leader or a system that will make things better again, because the pain is just too unbearable. And that's how the Antichrist manages to deceive a whole world. by capitalizing on the trauma. Whereas the true Messiah, the nature and character of Christ, has an opposite character. Uh, it is calling us to heaven. It is not making any worldly promises. Uh, it is focused on the heart and on you and not on your enemy. Um, it speaks a message of, the eternal realm rather than the temporal realm. And it's a small voice. It's not a big show. It's the angels whisper and they use very few words. And the devil and his minions put on a show, and they manipulate your emotions. Uh, the whole world is show business, including the Vatican. Sorry, but every institution on earth is part of this great showbiz carnival, and it always has been. And a true lover of truth knows that and commits their life uh, to um, questioning everything and scrutinizing. The thing is, though, if you're going to question things, you have to have a foundation by which you can measure things. You have to have principles on which you can measure things. You can't just do this in a vacuum or do it with your own uh, whimsical mind. It has to be grounded in solid principles and a wise assessment of your own experience of being alive. But that's where Christ comes in, who perfected the law, clarified the principles, and gave us the tools to scrutinize between those two characters, the spirit of this world and the spirit of God and his angels. There are telltale signs. There are real signposts on the road that the discerning can use to distinguish between that which is true and that which is not. Um, so, this is where we find ourselves. Anything to say to that?
Well, I was just reading as you were speaking. I was reading about what some of the church fathers said about the Antichrist. He's going to come from the tribe of Dan, and as Christ was a lion, the Antichrist will be a lion. As Christ is king, the Antichrist will be a king, and all the parallels that Saint Hippolytus talks about this Jewish leader who will be Antichrist at the end times. And so it's just interesting that it's common knowledge from biblical exegesis that the Antichrist will be Jewish and from the tribe of Dan, and that he's going to be mimicking and mocking and parroting a lot of the attributes that are attributed rightly to Christ. So, I mean, if you've read C.S. Lewis, he does a good treatment of that with the ape and the donkey, the ass, who's the Antichrist, and the man of iniquity or whatever. I don't know if you've read that. I think it's called The Last Battle. It's
I,
part of
I,
that
I did
Narnia
a long
series.
time ago. I did. I'll have to reread it. But
Powerful
yeah,
stuff. Powerful stuff. That
yeah.
mockery, that the imitation, the satanic black mass where they steal
Hmm.
hosts from the Catholic Church and this sort of thing. It's always going to be an imitation of what's good and holy and true and godly, and so
Hmm.
that's the way Christ likes. That's the way the Antichrist likes to
Yes.
do his show, the greatest show on earth. Another aspect of this whole deception, and it's what Saint Augustine said: the difficulty of the matter at hand being um, that when Satan disguises himself as an angel of light, it's very difficult to discern. It's very difficult. We have to test the spirits, but it's difficult. Okay, so what Saint Augustine says about that,
Most
what
difficult.
he says about that is
Yeah.
that the silver lining is that we are forced by that fact. We are forced by that fact to trust
Hmm.
in God and in God alone. Period. Period.
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
why I don't get my panties in a knot when people say Pope Francis might be this, Pope Francis might be that, or Pope Francis is this or he is that.
Mm.
My main concern is for you as a Catholic that you're not straying from Christ and his church, because Christ did build a church and it does have authority, infallibility, and indefectibility. Please don't stray from Christ and his church. But I'm not naive about any given individual who happens to be Pope, you know,
Right.
and Satan loves to masquerade as an angel of light. And so I intuitively follow St. Augustine's advice. I only trust God. Only God is good. Period.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not
Right.
naive. I'm not naive about that. But when
And
so,
and when you don't, if you're not sure which of two spirits presenting themselves to you is God or the devil, then what do you do?
well, if I had a visitation from what looked like a beautiful angel, I would rebuke it in the name of Jesus Christ and just banish it. And if it stuck around, they may say it's a good spirit, probably. You know what I mean? That's what the saints did.
Yeah.
That's what the saints
Um,
did.
well,
But
my
but
answer
but
to
but
that,
but
okay,
but but I also want to say, when it comes to a Catholic priest or a bishop or a cardinal or pope, I want to give, or my friend who's Catholic, I want to give the maximum benefit of the doubt. You know, so it's two different standards when it comes to like accepting some show, some supernatural vision or whatever. I'm going
yeah,
to err on the side of like, just let's rebuke this, assume it's satanic. But when it comes to
right.
my brother in the faith, I'm going to extend maximum benefit of the doubt, right?
Good answer.
Knowing full well that that person might be deceived, that they might be a wolf in sheep's clothing or whatever.
That's right. That's right. Another thing that I would add to that is that when you're not sure or when you're in doubt, if two or more things are presenting themselves to you and you have to make a choice and only one of them is the right one, but you're confused as to what which one is the true and the God sent, uh, then that's kind of like, I would say that's the default position for a great deal of our existence on this realm.
Yeah.
We can never really know for sure, but the difference between a nihilist or a solipsist is that they've given up the whole notion of truth itself, whereas the person who loves truth has faith that it is a real thing, even if they cannot see it. So if they're in the dark and they don't know which way is to the truth, they never abandon that basic assumption and immovable faith that it's out there somewhere. Uh, but and you never give that up. You never give up hope that that if you ask, you receive. You want the truth. You're hungry for the truth, and you will find it. But the more we orient ourselves to this world and focus on wished outcomes, the less capable we are of having that requisite humility and detachment to even begin to know where to seek truth, uh, because our worldly self is too invested rather than our eternal and essence of being.
Yeah, when it comes to uncertainty and profound spiritual um, questions, and you're at a crossroads or whatever, dilemmas, whatever you want to call it. I think about Joan of Arc, Saint Joan of Arc, one of my favorite saints of all time, even though she was very controversial at the time. But in retrospect, we know she was a saint. And she was mistreated. But during her trial, they asked her a trick question. They asked her, as they did to Christ. They
Yeah.
asked her. They asked her if she's in the state of grace, right? And it's a dogma of the church that we cannot know without a special grace, if we're in the state of grace or not. So Joan of Arc's answer, I think, is a good tool to have in our toolkit when it comes to doubt and dilemma and uncertainty and all these sorts of things, and putting God first, trusting in God. She said, "If I am in the state of grace, may it please God to keep me there, and if I'm not, may it please God to put me there." It's like it's a conditional statement. It's a conditional statement. We
Yeah.
as humans, we have access to modal logic. We have access to conditional statements. We can use the word if this, then that, and that is a very liberating aspect of our intellect and our will.
Mm.
It's like, I don't know, if you're the kid who smashed my window with this baseball that's on my dining room table. I don't know that, but if you are, you owe me $100 or whatever. It's
Yeah.
like, it's like we're faced with uncertainty all the time in mundane matters and in spiritual matters, and having recourse to that conditional is liberating, and it keeps us from being trapped. Oh, well, you committed to this proposition and you were wrong, therefore da 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 da
Right.
da. You know what I
Right.
mean? So
Yeah.
I think it was Newman Newman, the one who did the organic development of doctrine, who
Hmm.
said, "Do not affirm, do not deny,
Hmm.
not often at least, but make distinctions." That's what he said. Make distinctions. Don't affirm. Don't be quick to affirm. Don't be quick to deny, but
Right.
always make distinctions. There's so many important distinctions that are glossed over
Right.
in internet culture, people battling, and
Yeah.
you can see how it always leads to a victory for Satan every time. But if we sit
Yeah.
back and if we're calm and we don't pull the trigger, don't pull the
Right.
trigger, but make distinctions. Always make distinctions.
That's right. Well, I
Powerful,
agree
powerful
with that.
stuff. Powerful
Yeah, it
stuff.
is powerful stuff, and it's so easy to forget in the heat of battle.
Yeah.
Um, and so again, another reason why the uh, the principle of detachment and humility is so important, which is really basically requisite for getting anywhere close to a balanced and objective view of anything.
I'd like to do a little thought experiment with you, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
which is that, okay, let's say, God forbid, Pope Francis were to die, which he's going to do at some point, but let's say, God forbid, he were to die in the near future, and they had a conclave, and they, elect in a non-controversial way, it's airtight. They elected this guy, this particular cardinal, and it could go one of many ways. I mean, it could be ostensibly a very conservative, traditional style of pope. It could be a very progressive liberal pope that makes Francis seem like a staunch conservative. It could
Hmm.
be a fence-sitter, moderate, mamby-pamby pope that no one likes because he's not pleasing anyone. It could be any
Hmm.
number of things.
Hmm.
So, two-part question:
Hmm.
what would you like the next pope to be like, and what do you expect or fear or predict the next pope might be like?
Well, I'm not too concerned either way, to tell you the truth. That's like asking, and it's the same to me. It's the same kind of question. What kind of president do I hope the United States will get in the next election? Um, at this point, I really I can't say I'm invested enough in this whole carnival to really care. The only thing I care about is that people continue to grow in strength and courage and to stand on their own 2 feet between them and God. That's the only thing I care about. And we do not know what God is up to. We do not know by what means he's going to bring his children home.
Yeah.
He passeth all understanding. So, so because I personally am not so heavily invested in this world like I was maybe in my 30s and even up to my 40s. I'm pushing 60 now. It took a long time for me to realize that there's no solution in the political realm. And the world is the world. It'll be what it'll be, and it'll end the way it ends. There's not much I can do about it. And the only thing that we can do about it uh, are the same things we should have been doing all along since we left the garden, and that is to be fully accountable before God and to not cling to the flesh and to prepare for death.
Okay, I gotta intervene with another question that came to mind here. So, I believe in the literal creation story, and that that happened less than 8,000 years ago, and so it's very important to me to meditate on that scene and to think about the fall and how they're hiding in the bushes, hiding from God in the bushes, and these sorts of things. It's something I get pleasure from thinking about. But I want you to assign a grade, okay? Like, you know, you take a math test and you get like somewhere between 0% and 100% on the math test, right? So
Yeah.
when God's grading humanity in toto, like the whole of humanity since the fall till the end of time, what kind of mark would God give us in terms of like, yeah, you did a pretty good job of repenting, believing and repenting? You think that all of in total, it's closer to, you know, 30% mark, like not too good, or
Who?
closer
Wait,
to 70% mark?
who's this test for? All of
All of
humanity?
humanity
Oh,
on average, averaged out. Like we got some saints, we got some people that end up in hell, and we got a lot of people in between, like you and I, who are striving. You know, hopefully we'll make it. And then there are people that are sort of like not striving, and they're just muddling through and being de facto Satanists. So, what kind of mark can humanity get overall? It's a silly question, but I'm just wondering what you think. Do you see it like, you know, do you see like very few are saved, and so the mark's going to be very low? Or how do you envision that? Because it's nice to take that bird's eye view, that God's eye view, and to just say,
yeah.
look, I created paradise. You guys messed up, and it was a total disaster,
Yeah.
except for a few saints. Or like, what kind of assessment do you think God would have for the big picture?
Well, I think that God can break some rules, and one of them is humility. I think God would give His own creation 10 out of 10.
Of course, yeah, of course, of course.
And
He saw it. He said it was good. He saw the creation of humanity. He said it was very good. So yeah, of course. But I'm talking in
okay,
terms of the
but
choices,
what would
like
He
the
give
choices we
us? Is
made.
yeah,
The
the
choices,
thing
yeah.
that's a trick question and maybe an unanswerable question because it begins with the perfection of creation, and then it proceeds to the fall and our own corruptibility, which is a divine uh, component of the whole. The central divine fact of our being is predicated on free will, okay, out of which form forms the constant, immutable laws of love. You cannot love unless you have free will. It can only be freely given, otherwise, it isn't truly love. So, so the test of our being is precisely that. We're given free will as okay, well, God loves us. He wants us to come home, but He's giving us the choice. Now, why would He do that? Well, because it's like, you know, it's metallurgy. It's gotta go in the oven. To become the shiny, strong, good stuff. It sounds cruel to some people. Why isn't it just love and peace? Why do we have to suffer? Um, Well, our character is built by challenge, and we either go one way or the other. We can become stronger and more saintly, or we go the opposite way. Um, so the creation itself is perfect. Okay, we are not perfect until we allow ourselves onto that path whereby we can be made perfect again by God, not by ourselves. But if I was just to put it in sort of a temporal timeline, a way of saying it, like what would I give humanity out of 10? I would put it quite low, and I don't say that arrogantly because I don't rate myself very high either. Um, we fail miserably, even by outward appearances. If it seems we're pretty nice guy, pretty successful, love our children, da 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 da. We don't really know what we're made of until we're really pressed against the wall, and how we deal with our enemies, and how we deal with our own shortcomings and flaws, whether we own up to them and correct them, or whether we blame other people and just double down in our errors. Uh, all in all, it's a low to middling rate that I would give it, and I think that all the souls that pass into heaven by and large, the great majority of those scored low to middling. Um, Heaven isn't where good people go. Heaven is where the humble and correctable and cleansable and sanctifiable people go, uh, all of which is done by God. So, uh, just like the church isn't a place where saints go, it's the place where sinners go. It's a hospital for sick souls. The difference between the people that are removed from the love of God and the ones that return to the love of God is not measured by one's goodness or badness. It's measured by their humility and their ability to repent, period. Now, what percentage of people on earth are on one or the other camp in that regard is something only God can really know. So, as long as we're here, we have to assume, like you were saying, when we're dealing one on one with our fellow man, we have to have the benefit of the doubt and a charitable heart because we never know truly who we're speaking to. And especially when we have this feeling that the person we're talking to is naive or doesn't know such and such, or is a bit lower in the rung than you, and maybe I can teach them something, and da da da, and then you're gobsmacked and humbled to the nth degree when you find out you're talking to someone who's actually quite wise and actually quite wiser than you. Appearance can be quite deceptive, so that's why we always have to be humble. And again, that's hard to do. And I rate myself pretty low in that regard, but I hope to improve. So that's why I
Yeah.
call myself a Christian, because I know that you have to follow Christ and you have to suck it up, because the light of truth stings in direct proportion to how far you've veered from the truth.
My
The
friend,
truth, the
sorry,
light of truth is manna and bliss when you're already on the righteous path. Ah, but the more darkened you are by your selfishness and error and delusion and sin, the harder the light stings. Okay, and that's when the test of humility is really uh, laid on the line. You have to be willing to suffer. Uh, just as to master anything, you have to be willing to suffer, whether it's mastering the violin or whatever. There's a sacrifice and certain amount of pain that is part and parcel of the journey. So
my friend Emily, thank you for that. My friend Emily asks a question. What is the difference between giving unquestioning obedience to God and unquestioning obedience to the material world's superiors? Well, the difference is that God deserves all our love and obedience because he's perfect, and all legitimate authority comes from God, yes, but there's some illegitimate authority here below. So it's going to be a mixed bag in terms of obedience and submission to any human leader. That's my answer. What's your answer, Tom?
I need the question again.
Why do we give perfect obedience to God but not to superiors here on earth?
Hmm. Um, well, because no man comes before God, and here on terra firma, respect has to be earned. Um, and there's two meanings to respect, of course. All life, including your enemies, has to be respected. That just means uh, you open the door for everyone. You pick up a dropped orange off the floor and give it to the person, whether he is Hitler or your mother. The basic courtesies and respect for the dignity of the person and the life of the person is a given. But then there's moral respect. Do I respect this person's character? Do I respect this person's opinion and actions? That has to be earned, and especially if you're in the position of doctor, teacher, priest, pope. police officer, etc. You respect the authority, and that you're wise as serpents but gentle as doves, especially among the powerful. You do not respect an authority figure for breaching the oaths of that office. That's despicable. Um, but you do not fight that by defying the authority of the police force itself, or being in contempt of the court, or whatever it might be. This is absolutely the wrong way to battle that. But there are, give unto Caesar what's Caesar's, and unto God's what's God's. I mean, you have to play this wisely. But as far as what you agree with and take on board in your heart, and what informs your actions and your relationship with others and your relationship with God, um, this all has to come from the authority of God and the wisdom of the saints and the angels, the example of Jesus Christ. Period. Um, so that's how I would navigate that. I don't know if that's useful or not, but
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm just looking up the book of Hebrews, chapter 13, verse 2. This is something that came to mind a little bit earlier in our discussion when we're talking about how to treat people by default to maximum benefit of the doubt, etc. Hebrews 13:2 says, "Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it." That's one mysterious thing I like to keep in mind when I say it.
Hmm.
And the other one, the
That's
other,
a beautiful one too. I love that one because like we were talking before, is you just don't know who you're dealing with.
yeah,
You have no idea.
and
No, they could be the devil too.
yeah,
They could be an angel, and you think
yeah,
they're an idiot, and they're actually a wise sage.
yeah.
Or the flip could be reversed. But because you're fearless in the Lord, you, this doesn't not this should
Concern you.
not concern you.
Yeah.
You treat charitably anybody. You welcome them in your home. You feed the hungry, and you clothe the naked, and heal the sick, and so on and so forth. And you listen to what people have to say, especially the whole spirit of censorship is obviously a protectionism, a fear of the powerful, is to protect a lie. Why are you so afraid? And if fools are going to speak and say the most abominable things, let them speak. They're going to extend all the rope they need to hang their own selves with. Let them expose themselves.
Yeah,
What are you afraid of?
exactly,
You
exactly.
know, this whole kind of infantilism, where it's certain ideas are dangerous and we
Mm.
can't let them into people's
Mm.
minds. You know, no, thank you. I do not want to be protected by you. Thank you very much. I'm not afraid, and we have to encourage people to not be afraid. Listen to it, weigh it. Are you afraid that you do not have a conscience and that you won't be able to figure it out for yourself? And if that's the case, why is that the case? Why aren't you standing on solid ground? Well, one reason might be is that you've uh, abnegated your responsibility and your sovereignty of mind, and you've given over your thought processes and your beliefs and your direction in life over to an authority. And give me the dotted line and I'll sign, as long as it works out for me. There's people that have been wrongly encouraged to give up their own thinking and scrutiny, and to hand that responsibility over to world authority and experts and so on and so forth. Um, the world is awash in details and distractions and stories, experiences and perspectives and ideologies, and on and on and on and on. But the principles are few. There's a few principles that have to guide us in life to navigate all the various differences and variations and details of life. So, like I said before, if you're not standing on clear principles, then you're just being tossed around in the wind. You're a paddle without a canoe, and you're so easily manipulated and steered in whatever direction they want you to go. So,
Absolutely. Thanks for the great chat. I have to get going here because I got to feed the wife before my next interview at 5.
who are
Um,
you interviewing next?
Lev, he's a friend of Styx. Do you know Styx Hexenhammer 666?
I believe so.
Yeah, he's
I,
long-haired guy, libertarian,
yeah.
Satanist. I interviewed him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
cool guy. We actually, Anna and I went to visit him at his home in Vermont the other week.
Nice.
Cool guy. Yeah.
Okay.
So because of him, because of my interview with Styx, I've got this interview now with his friend Lev, who's also a YouTuber, and so I'm going to interview him. I don't know what he stands for because I don't like to investigate my guests before I talk to them. I like to discover on the fly. But he seems like a
Hmm,
cool guy from what little I've seen, and he has
okay.
a show called Breaking the Rules where he tries to get people that wouldn't normally talk together to talk together. So they have different ideas, they maybe
Yeah.
disagree. Like so he's trying to do that project, which I think is very good. I hate the siloing of social media where I've got people unfollowing me as soon as they discover that they disagree with me. I hate that. I hate that. I mean, I hate that so much. You can't imagine how much I hate that
I
because
I share you.
I want to be surrounded by people that actually think for themselves and that are
Yeah.
not afraid of a different idea.
You don't want an echo chamber. And what's the
No.
point? What's the point of having this podcast unless it's to, you know, share different perspectives and arrive at some kind of a harmonious back and forth where we
Yeah.
can learn something. I share the same frustration, this kind of dislike, the thumbs up, thumbs down. It's a mentality. It's like, uh, how about neither? How about neither? How about just listening and
Yeah.
and realizing that there's good and bad in everything. That just because a person thinks a certain way on a certain issue and it resembles the opinions of a certain group of people that are also associated with genocide, it doesn't mean that person also agrees with genocide. They just have something in common with someone who you think is terrible. Guess what? So do you. Uh, this is why conversation. This is the devil's trick. It's a way to further entrench the division and to cut down honest and brave dialogue.
Uh,
And to dialogue in any kind of productive way takes courage on and good faith on both parties involved.
I want to
So
give a
let's stay in that spirit. Amen.
amen,
And
amen.
happy New Year to you and Anna.
Hallelujah, hallelujah. I want to give a shout out to Pick and Choose. I forgot to give a shout out to him. I'm assuming it's a guy. Why would a woman be on my podcast, right? So I'm assuming it's a guy. But he says that the siloing is awful and echo chambers lead to intellectual incest. I thought that was
Good one.
a great image. Intellectual incest. Yeah,
Yeah.
he said, yeah, he's a guy, so I'm right 99.9% of the time when I predict the gender of my people in the live chat. But once it was all women, it was all women. But I happened to know that they were all women. It was
Okay.
like 3 women in my live chat. It's like, what's going on?
Right.
Toxic estrogen or toxic femininity or whatever. I was just joking.
Right.
But yeah, I appreciate you.
How about toxic humanity? And we'll just end it there. We can all be equal
Man
again.
versus woman, man versus woman. I appreciate your beauty. You're very handsome for a 60-year-old. Holy crap. But
That's I cut my hair. It makes me look a little
uh
younger.
but
Thank
no, your beauty is one thing, but your inner beauty, your mind, your love of Christ and your discerning mind and your hatred of lies and all these sorts of things. I love you and I can't wait to see you again. And we'll have you back on the live stream anytime, okay?
thank you so much.
All right, my
We'll talk
brother.
soon.
God
Okay.
bless you. We'll talk soon.
God bless you.
Bye bye.
Okay. Bye.